My business partner stole my app idea and launched it without me. He made millions, until my hidden code destroyed everything. I spent 2 years building an app with my best friend. One morning I woke up to find he had launched it under his own company, cut me out completely, and was already getting investor funding. What he did not realize was that every single line of the core algorithm was built on a framework I created and owned the patent to. This is the story of how my best friend robbed me blind, became a tech celebrity, and then lost absolutely everything because of one thing he never bothered to understand: the code. Let me take you back to where it all started, because this is not just a story about a stolen app. This is about trust, betrayal, ego, and the most satisfying legal takedown you have ever heard of. My name is Ethan, and I have been writing code since I was 13 years old. While other kids were playing sports or figuring out how to talk to girls at school dances, I was in my bedroom building websites, writing scripts, and teaching myself every programming language I could get my hands on. Java, Python, C++, JavaScript, Ruby. By the time I graduated from college with a degree in computer science, I had already built and sold 2 small apps on my own. Nothing groundbreaking, just utility tools for productivity, but they made me about $40,000 combined and taught me more about the tech industry than any classroom lecture ever did. I learned how apps go from idea to launch. I learned about user acquisition, retention metrics, and monetization. I learned about the importance of clean code and solid architecture. And most importantly, I learned that in the tech world, the person who writes the code and the person who takes the credit are not always the same person. That lesson would become very relevant later. But first, let me tell you about Ryan. I met Ryan at a coding boot camp after college. It was one of those intensive 12-week programs where you build projects non-stop, sleep about 4 hours a night, and emerge on the other side either a significantly better developer or a burnt-out shell of a human being. I came out better. Ryan came out charming. See, Ryan was smart. Not genius level, not the kind of developer who could architect complex systems in his head, but solid. He was good at front-end design, had an excellent eye for user interfaces, and understood how to make things look clean and modern. But his real superpower was not technical at all. Ryan was an incredible talker. The guy could sell ice to a penguin and make the penguin feel like it got a great deal. Where I was quiet, introverted, and happiest when buried in code, Ryan was loud, charismatic, and most comfortable when he was the center of attention in a room full of people. We became best friends almost immediately. After the boot camp, we started freelancing together out of a cramped co-working space downtown. I would build the backend, the databases, the servers, the logic that made everything actually work. Ryan would handle the front end, the user-facing design, and most importantly, the client relations. He was the face, I was the brain, and together we were excellent at what we did. We made good money, built a solid reputation, and within a year we had a steady stream of clients who kept coming back because our work was reliable and looked fantastic. We became so close that we were practically brothers. We hung out every weekend, played the same video games, went to the same concerts. I was the best man at his wedding when he married his college girlfriend, Sophia. He gave a toast at my 30th birthday that made everyone in the room cry. I trusted Ryan completely, without reservation, without a single doubt. That trust is what makes what happened next so devastating. The idea came to me at 3 in the morning on a random Tuesday. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how frustrating it was to manage personal finances across multiple platforms. Banks had their own apps, investment platforms had theirs, budgeting tools were completely separate, tax software lived in its own world. Nothing communicated with anything else. You had to manually check 5 different apps just to understand your own financial picture. What if there was one app that aggregated everything, pulled data from all your accounts, and did not just show you numbers in a dashboard, but actually analyzed your spending patterns using machine learning, and gave you personalized, actionable advice? Not generic spend less on coffee tips that every finance app parrots. Real, specific, intelligent recommendations based on your actual behavior, your income patterns, your bills, your goals. An AI financial advisor that lived in your pocket and got smarter the more you used it. I called Ryan the next morning at 7 a.m. and pitched it to him in a breathless rush. He was quiet for about 10 seconds, which for Ryan was an eternity. And then he said, "Ethan, this is it. This is the one." We met at the co-working space that afternoon, shook hands, and agreed to build it together. 50-50 partners. Equal ownership, equal effort, equal reward. We even did the cliché thing where we wrote it on a napkin and both signed it. We laughed about it at the time. The napkin would matter later. For the next 2 years, that app consumed my entire existence. I named the project FinPulse, and I poured everything I had into it. The core of the product, the thing that would make it different from every other finance app on the market, was the machine learning engine. I did not use off-the-shelf libraries or pre-built models. I developed a proprietary framework from scratch, a custom neural network architecture specifically designed to analyze financial transaction data, identify behavioral patterns, predict future spending, and generate personalized optimization strategies. This was not a weekend project. This was 2 years of research, development, testing, failing, rebuilding, and testing again. I read academic papers on financial machine learning. I studied behavioral economics. I built training datasets, designed feature engineering pipelines, and created a novel approach to user clustering that no one in the industry had attempted before. The framework had 3 core modules: a transaction classifier that could categorize any purchase with 97% accuracy, a predictive engine that could forecast monthly spending within 5% margin of error, and a recommendation system that generated advice based on the user's specific financial DNA. I was so proud of that algorithm and so aware of how valuable it was that I did something most developers never bother with. I filed a provisional patent, then followed up with a full utility patent. It cost me about $8,000 out of my own pocket. When I told Ryan about it, he waved his hand dismissively and said, "Who is going to steal financial analysis code, man? You are being paranoid. Just focus on building." But I had read enough horror stories about tech partnerships gone wrong, founders who got pushed out, engineers whose work was repackaged and sold without credit. I filed the paperwork, went through the examination process, got the patent approved, and kept all the documentation locked in a fireproof safe and backed up in 2 separate cloud storage accounts. The patent was in my name and my name only, because I wrote every single line of that code by myself, on my own time, using my own research. Ryan never touched the algorithm. He could not have if he wanted to. He did not have the mathematical background to understand the architecture, let alone modify it. His contribution was the front end, and to be fair, his contribution was excellent. Ryan designed an app interface that was genuinely beautiful. Clean lines, intuitive navigation, smooth animations, a color palette that felt trustworthy and modern. He also took the lead on the business side, creating pitch decks, drafting investor emails, building landing pages, and cultivating a community of beta testers through social media and Reddit posts. By the end of year 2, we had about 5,000 beta users who were actively using FinPulse and providing feedback. The reviews were incredible. People were saying the app changed how they thought about money. Several users reported saving thousands of dollars in the first 3 months just by following the AI's personalized recommendations. We were ready to launch. We had a date set, a marketing plan ready to execute, and 3 investor meetings lined up with venture capital firms that had expressed genuine interest. I was working on final bug fixes and optimization. Ryan was coordinating the launch logistics and preparing for the investor pitches. Everything was on track, and I genuinely believed we were about to change the financial technology industry. Then, on a random Wednesday morning, 6 days before our planned launch, I woke up to 17 text messages, 4 missed calls, and a notification from TechCrunch. The article headline read, "FinScope launches revolutionary AI-powered finance app, secures $3.5 million in seed funding." There was a photo of Ryan, grinning ear to ear in a tailored suit I had never seen him wear, standing in front of a banner with our app's logo, except it was not quite our logo. It was slightly redesigned, with a different font and a new color scheme, under a new company name, FinScope Technologies, a company I had never heard of. A company where Ryan was listed as the sole founder, sole CEO, and sole visionary. I read the article 3 times. My hands went numb. My vision got blurry. The app Ryan launched was our app, our interface, our features, our beta user base, our data, and running underneath it all, powering every single recommendation, every prediction, every financial insight, was my algorithm. My patented proprietary machine learning framework was the beating heart of a product that I had been completely erased from. I called Ryan immediately. He did not answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I called a 3rd time. Nothing. I sent a text message that said, "What did you do?" He read it immediately. The red receipt popped up right away, and he did not respond. An hour later, I got an email from a lawyer I had never heard of, a man named Tom Garrett at some firm downtown. The email informed me that FinScope Technologies was the sole owner of all intellectual property related to the application, and that any claims I might have were without legal merit. Attached was a copy of an operating agreement that I had never seen in my life, backdated to 18 months earlier, listing Ryan as the sole founder and me as a contracted developer who had been compensated for my services in full. The agreement included my signature. Except I had never signed it. He had forged my name on a legal document and used it as the foundation to steal 2 years of my life's work. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a disagreement about equity splits. This was calculated, premeditated fraud. I sat at my kitchen table for about an hour, staring at my phone, breathing deliberately, trying to keep the top of my head from blowing off. Part of me wanted to drive to whatever glass-walled office Ryan was celebrating in and put my fist through his perfectly designed user interface of a face. But the other part of me, the part that spent 2 years building an algorithm so sophisticated that Ryan could not even explain how it worked to investors without reading from a script I had written for him, that part was calm, because I knew something Ryan clearly did not understand. He could steal the app. He could forge documents. He could raise millions from gullible investors. He could put on a suit and play CEO on magazine covers. But he could not change one fundamental, legal, documented, patent office verified fact. The engine that made the entire product work belonged to me. The first thing I did was call my patent attorney. Her name was Dr. Vivian Cho, and she was one of the best intellectual property lawyers on the entire West Coast. I had worked with her when I filed the original patent, and she remembered me and the technology well. When I explained what had happened, there was a long silence on the phone, the kind of silence that comes from a professional carefully processing information before making a move. Then she said, "Ethan, this is about to get very, very interesting. I need you to do 3 things. Do not contact Ryan. Do not post anything online. Do not talk to any media. Let me handle everything." Vivian was not just a lawyer. She was a strategist who thought 6 moves ahead, and her strategy was nothing short of brilliant. Instead of immediately filing a lawsuit, which would have been my instinct, and which would have alerted Ryan and given him time to prepare, hire better lawyers, maybe even modify the code to try to work around my patent, Vivian decided to let him keep running. She said, the more money he raises, the more users he acquires, the more press coverage he generates, the more public statements he makes about the technology, the bigger the damages are going to be when we file. Every dollar that flows into that company based on your technology increases what we can recover. Let him build his castle as tall as he wants. We are going to pull out the foundation. So I waited. And let me tell you, waiting was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Harder than building the algorithm. Harder than any technical challenge I had ever faced. Because every day I saw Ryan's face online, and every day it got worse. Over the next 3 months, FinScope exploded. Ryan raised a Series A round, bringing his total funding to $12 million. He was featured in Forbes under a headline that called him the next generation of fintech. He did a cover story for Wired magazine. Bloomberg interviewed him about the future of AI in personal finance. He gave a TEDx talk titled Building Technology That Cares, where he talked about his passion for helping people and his vision for democratizing financial intelligence. I watched that TEDx talk alone in my apartment, and when Ryan described the algorithm using words and phrases that I had written in a technical document he clearly found on our shared server, I had to pause the video and walk around the block 3 times just to keep from throwing my laptop out the window. He hired a team of 30 people. Engineers, designers, marketers, a head of operations. He moved into a sleek office space with exposed brick and a coffee bar. He was living in a penthouse apartment and driving a matte black luxury car that cost more than most people's houses. He was everywhere, all the time, and every single article called him a visionary, a genius, and a self-made tech innovator. I was sitting in my apartment eating microwave dinners and watching my stolen work make someone else famous. It was agonizing. But Vivian was using those 3 months wisely. She was building a case so comprehensive and so airtight that no judge, jury, or lawyer on earth could find a crack in it. She gathered code commit records from our shared GitHub repository. Hundreds of commits over 2 years, all time-stamped and attributed to my account, proving that I had written the core algorithm. She obtained copies of our text messages and emails, hundreds of conversations where Ryan and I discussed the 50-50 partnership, where he explicitly acknowledged that the algorithm was my work, where he literally texted me, "Bro, your algorithm is insane. You are the brains of this operation." She hired a forensic document examiner, one of the top 3 in the country, who analyzed the operating agreement Ryan's lawyer had sent me, and concluded with near absolute certainty that my signature had been digitally copied from another document and pasted onto the agreement. The forger had not even been particularly good at it. She also obtained a sworn affidavit from 2 of our original beta testers, people who attended early demo events where both Ryan and I stood at the front of the room and were introduced as co-founders. One of them had taken photos that showed both of our names on the presentation slides. When Vivian was satisfied that our case was bulletproof, she filed the lawsuit, and she did not just file for breach of contract and fraud. She filed for patent infringement under federal law. The patent infringement claim was the nuclear option. Under U.S. patent law, if someone uses patented technology without the patent holder's authorization, the patent holder can seek an injunction, meaning a court order to immediately stop all use of the technology plus damages that can include all profits derived from the infringing product. Not some of the profits, not a reasonable licensing fee, all profits, every single dollar. Every dollar Finscope earned. Every dollar investors put in that was used to build, market, and scale a product powered by my stolen technology. All of it was potentially recoverable. Vivian estimated the damages at somewhere between $15 and $20 million, factoring in the funding rounds, the revenue, and the willful nature of the infringement. The lawsuit landed like a cruise missile on a glass house. Ryan's investors found out before he could spin it. They were furious. Not at me, at Ryan. Because when Ryan raised money from them, he had signed representations and warranties stating that he owned all the intellectual property free and clear, with no encumbrances, no disputes, and no third-party claims. If that turned out to be false, and it very clearly was false, it was not just a civil matter between me and Ryan. It was potential securities fraud. The investors had been lied to, and they had put $12 million on the line based on those lies. Ryan finally called me the day after the lawsuit hit the news. His voice was completely different. Gone was the confident, TED-talking, Forbes cover-posing CEO. He sounded like a man standing in the ruins of everything he had built on someone else's foundation. Ethan, come on, man, we can work this out. I will give you equity, 30%, 40%, whatever you want. I will put your name on the company. Co-founder, CTO, whatever title you want. Just drop the lawsuit, please. I let the silence sit for a few seconds before responding. You forged my signature on a legal document, Ryan. You stole 2 years of my work and told the entire world it was yours. You raised $12 million on a lie. You went on a TEDx stage and described my algorithm using my own words while I sat at home watching. There is nothing to work out. Ethan, come on. We were brothers. We built this together. Exactly, I said. We built it together, and then you erased me and stole everything. Remember that the next time you give a talk about building technology that cares. I hung up and forwarded the call recording to Vivian, because yes, I was recording it, and yes, my lawyer had told me to. The legal proceedings took about 8 months, and every single day of those 8 months was a catastrophe for Ryan. Discovery was devastating. Vivian's team obtained internal emails from Finscope, where Ryan discussed with his lawyer Tom Garrett how to restructure the company to exclude me. There were emails where Ryan literally wrote, "Ethan is too focused on the technical side to pay attention to the business. By the time he figures out what happened, it will be too late to do anything about it." There were text messages to friends where he bragged about the scheme, called me naive, and joked that I was too smart to be street smart. But the most damaging evidence was the independent technical analysis. Vivian hired one of the country's leading software forensic experts, a former MIT professor who had testified in over 50 patent cases. The expert examined Finscope's codebase and my patented framework. His report was 37 pages long, and his conclusion was unambiguous. The core algorithm used in Finscope was not merely similar to my patented technology, it was identical. Character for character, function for function, variable name for variable name. Ryan had not even bothered to refactor the code or change the naming conventions. There were literally comments embedded in the production code that said things like Ethan's optimization v3 and EWH custom loss function, my initials and my naming style, still sitting in the codebase of a product that claimed I never existed. The judge's ruling was comprehensive and unforgiving. Liable on every single count. Patent infringement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, forgery. The damages were calculated based on Finscope's total revenue, the investor funds raised based on misrepresented IP ownership, and a multiplier for the willful and deliberate nature of the infringement. The final judgment came to $14.7 million. The court also issued a permanent injunction ordering Finscope to immediately cease all use of my patented technology. The algorithm was so deeply and fundamentally integrated into the product, it was literally the brain of the entire application, that removing it would leave nothing but a pretty shell with no functionality. Finscope had to shut down. Completely. Overnight, 300,000 users woke up one morning to find the app they relied on was gone. Ryan's investors filed their own lawsuit against him for securities fraud. His lawyer Tom Garrett, who had helped engineer the scheme, was reported to the state bar. Ryan's team of 30 employees was laid off with no severance and no warning because the company had no money left and no product to sell. The penthouse was gone. The car was repossessed. The TEDx talk was quietly removed from the platform. The Forbes article was updated with an editor's note explaining the fraud. Ryan went from being one of the most talked about founders in fintech to being the most infamous cautionary tale in startup culture. Business schools added his case to their ethics curriculum. His name became shorthand for founder fraud. When people in tech say do not pull a Ryan, they mean do not steal from your technical co-founder and assume you will get away with it. The aftermath was something I never could have anticipated. Ryan's 30 employees, most of whom had no idea about the fraud and genuinely believed they were working for a legitimate visionary, were left scrambling. Some of them reached out to me. One senior engineer, a woman named Priya, who had been hired to expand the algorithm, sent me a message that said, "I spent 8 months trying to improve code I did not fully understand, and now I know why." It was not Ryan's code. The architecture was too elegant, too thoughtful for someone who could not explain it to me without reading from notes. I am sorry for what happened to you. I hired Priya 6 months later. She is now my head of engineering and one of the best hires I have ever made. Another casualty was Sophia, Ryan's wife. She filed for divorce about 4 months after the verdict, citing irreconcilable differences, which was a polite way of saying I did not sign up to be married to a convicted fraudster. From what I heard through mutual friends, Sophia had no knowledge of what Ryan did. She genuinely believed he had built the company on his own merit. Finding out the truth about who her husband really was destroyed, not just the marriage but her trust in everything she thought their life was built on. I felt genuine sympathy for her. She was collateral damage in a disaster that Ryan created entirely on his own. The investors never recovered their full investment. Between the legal fees, the settlement costs, and the fact that the company had no viable product without my algorithm, FinScope's assets were worth almost nothing. The $12 million they invested was largely gone, burned through on Ryan's salary, the fancy office, the marketing campaigns, and the lavish lifestyle he funded with their money. Several of the investors banded together and filed a separate civil suit against Ryan for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. That case settled for a fraction of what they lost, because by that point Ryan had almost nothing left to take. I took my patent, my vindicated reputation, my recovered damages, and I did what I should have been able to do 2 years earlier. I launched my own version of the app. I called it ClearPath Finance. I did not need a forged signature or a stolen codebase. I just built a great product with talented people and launched it the honest way. ClearPath raised $8 million in its first funding round. Our investors knew the full story, and they saw it as a strength, not a liability. One of them said in a press interview, "This guy built technology so good that someone committed multiple felonies to steal it, and then he won it all back in court." That is exactly the kind of founder you want to bet on. Within a year, ClearPath had over 200,000 users. Within 2 years, over 1 million. We won Best New FinTech App at a major industry awards ceremony. I was invited to speak at the same conferences where Ryan used to be the star. At one event, a journalist asked me about Ryan and the whole saga. I kept it classy. "I had a business partner who made some very poor decisions," I said. "But I do not define my story by what someone else did to me. I define it by what I built after." There is one more thing I want to mention because it says a lot about who Ryan really was versus who he pretended to be. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, Vivian's team obtained Ryan's personal financial records. Despite raising $12 million for FinScope, despite the company generating over $2 million in revenue during its brief existence, Ryan was personally broke, not struggling. Broke. He had been paying himself an enormous salary, close to $400,000 a year, and spending every cent of it. The penthouse lease cost $14,000 a month. The car was leased at $2,200 a month. He had credit card bills totaling over $90,000. He had spent hundreds of thousands on restaurants, trips, designer clothes, and a watch collection that included 3 timepieces worth more than most used cars. He was funding a lifestyle with investor money and hoping the music would never stop. The music stopped. Last I heard, Ryan took a plea deal on the criminal charges related to the forgery and securities fraud. He served a short stint and is now working a quiet IT support job in another state, far from the startup scene, far from the spotlight he craved more than anything. He deleted all his social media. His LinkedIn, which used to list him as CEO and visionary at FinScope Technologies, is gone. His name no longer comes up at conferences except as a warning. And me? I am sitting in the office of my own company, leading a team of 50 brilliant people, running an app that helps over 1 million users make better financial decisions every single day. On my desk, right next to my monitor, is a framed copy of my original patent filing. Not as a trophy, and not as a reminder of what was stolen, but as a reminder of something my gut told me 5 years ago when Ryan said I was being paranoid. Protect your work. Trust your instincts. Document everything. And never ever assume that the person smiling across the table has your best interests at heart. Ryan thought he could build an empire on someone else's foundation and charm his way out of the consequences. He found out the hard way that stolen ground always crumbles, and the person who actually laid the foundation is the one left standing when the dust settles. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad for Ryan, if I have any sympathy for the guy I once called my best friend, the guy who was my best man at my imagined future wedding, the guy I spent 2 years building something incredible with before he decided to steal it all. And honestly, I do. A little. Not for what happened to him, because he earned every single consequence, but for who he could have been. If Ryan had launched FinPulse with me, as equal partners the way we planned, we would have built something extraordinary together. His charisma and my technology were a powerful combination. We could have been one of the great founder stories, two best friends who changed an industry. Instead, he chose greed over partnership, shortcuts over integrity, and a penthouse over a friend. And that choice cost him everything. That is not revenge. I never wanted revenge. I wanted justice, and I got it. The rest was just karma catching up, the way it always does. Not with a bang, but with a court order, a patent number, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the truth, like good code, always compiles in the end.